Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new 2025 Schleich release. This time we've got the Dilophosaurus, and quite a few people had told me that this Dilophosaurus looked better in hand than the original promo images led us to believe, and honestly, I absolutely agree. It definitely does. One thing that's really cool about it is, as we can see, it has lips, which is definitely an exciting new addition to their Dilophosaurus, but at the same time, it still looks pretty awkward and pretty rough. It's definitely not any sort of a contender for the best Dilophosaurus out there. No doubt about that. But the one area that I think definitely looks a little bit better on this one than I was expecting is the head sculpt. Because originally when we had seen this, we saw like this awkward front view. And from the front, it just looks super strange. My camera won't focus on it, I don't know why. It looks really thick and awkward, but then once you turn it to the side, it somehow just like a magic trick becomes a little bit nicer looking. Obviously, it's not incredible, but it definitely looks a little bit better. You can see some pretty decent paintwork for it, though. You've got like a brown up here for the crest. You also have a light brown that sort of runs up through the eye and then down toward the jawline, and then up and over the nostrils, and then it transitions to a blue. You do see that brown return here for the underbelly though, but I like the coloration. I think the paint apps look pretty good, and they have also applied a nice dark wash to help highlight all of the detail, which also looks pretty decent. You've got the eye painted with a yellow and a nice black pupil. There's also a little bit of gray there around the eye, and we can see again the nostrils sculpted out, but there's no darker tone really inside there to highlight it. The skin texture looks pretty decent here in the face, actually. There's quite a bit of scale detail, and it looks pretty vibrant as a whole. We do have an articulated jaw, which can open actually pretty wide for the figure. You can see the skin stretching there on the inside of the mouth. We also have a nice pinkish tone for the skin on the inside of the mouth right there, but you can also see a dark wash present, helping to highlight the detail. We also have a tongue sculpted. Boy, my camera does not want to focus. There we go. A tongue sculpted out in there, painted with like a darker purplish tone. We can see the pink moving along the gums, and you can also see the teeth, kind of Schleich-like, again big and bulky, but well, actually small and bulky, but they look okay. They're painted with a white, and you can see the teeth on the inside of the mouth on the upper side looking about as awkward as it gets when it comes to the teeth of a predatory dinosaur. They look super strange. They almost look like they've been cut off, which is really, really weird. And even for Schleich, they look weird. Schleich normally has like rounded teeth, where these almost look like somebody sawed them off with a razor blade. So they look very, very strange. Unfortunately, this dinosaur has had some dental work that did not pan out for him. But you can see we have a pinkish tone moving through the inside of the mouth on the upper side. Again, a dark wash present up there as well. If those teeth looked better, I feel like the figure as a whole wouldn't be so bad looking, at least in the head sculpt. Obviously not great, but not bad looking. But here's where we start to kind of pick up a problem for this figure, I think. As we lead down along the back, first of all, we can see kind of like a reddish brown following along the spinal column, and we have a line of ridges leading along the spinal column. But as you move down into the side of the body, we have the bluish tone with kind of like a brown wash, but I think the scale detail on this looks just so generic, and the figure as a whole doesn't really have a whole lot of really fine detail to it. Like, there's not much in the way of like skin wrinkles and folds. You have a little bit, but not as much as I'm used to when it comes to Schleich. Schleich's figures are usually like super, super highly detailed when it comes to the fine details, or at least that's the way I feel. They don't always look the greatest, but they usually have nice, impressive detailing. Whereas this one, the detail almost looks like what I would imagine seeing on like a generic dragon figure or something like that. It just doesn't look very good. As you lead down into the arms, you can also see they look awkward. We've got pronated wrists, just kind of like a weird, I don't even know how to put it, just a bulkiness to them, kind of an awkward look. And you can also see the fingers. They look okay. The nails are, of course, your traditional Schleich nails that are big and bulky and rounded. We can see they're painted with a brown. As we move back into the stomach, you slightly see that brown, the underbelly brown there, that kind of light brown creeping up into the stomach. Pretty smooth transition as we lead back up. I think the paintwork of the figure is about as good as you get for Schleich. It's not half bad, and the way that they painted it out with different washes and stuff definitely helps to make it look better. The legs look very strange as you lead down. You kind of see muscle definition, but at the same time, It's just kind of weird looking. As you lead down, you can see the knee. You can also see that the skin texture, the scales kind of decrease in size drastically right around the knee region. As you lead down into the almost non-existent calf, you can see at that point the scales are very, very small. And then as you lead down into the foot sculpt, that foot sculpt is super weird looking. It's like all kinds of flattened out. It looks like he basically had his feet run over by a bus, and it just looks very strange. You can see there are scoots moving down the toes, and the nails are again painted with a brown, but it looks very, very weird. You can also see the dew claw is sculpted on here, but shockingly is not painted. That's not something I'm used to when it comes to Schleich. They usually at least paint the dew claws. But as you lead back out here into the tail, you can continue to see again that fairly generic looking skin texture leading out through the tail. You can see the ridges basically taper off about 3/4 of the way through the tail as you lead out. You have a little bit of a curve right there. Moving along the underside, you can see a much finer style to the scales leading here along. You also have kind of like a yellowish brown with a nice brown wash down here, which does help to amp up the detail, make it look a bit more realistic. You can see the scales on the undersides of the feet as well. When we turn the figure around, again, it looks okay. I mean, it definitely doesn't look great, but it certainly looks better than the original prototype images had led us to believe. Obviously, the dinosaur has its head turned toward its right. You can see that as we move down through the length of the neck. There's like a really weird line of kind of small scales following along the neck right here, which just looks for some reason very out of place. It's kind of weird. But as you move down, you can see again the arms look pretty much the same as they did on the other side. The only real big difference on this side is the fact that the leg is trailing here, stretching the skin right there, so you can kind of see a better view of the stomach. And it looks again okay, but still really quite generic when it comes to the scale detail. And then as you lead down, you can see our foot that again was run over by a bus. You can also see that there are scoots moving down the shin all the way down into the foot, just like we saw actually on their recent Carcharodontosaurus. And then we lead back up, and as you lead out, you again see the curvatures to the tail. So overall, it's not that bad, but it's not that great either. It is a little bit bigger, though, than our last Dilophosaurus, which I think would make this the largest Dilophosaurus that Schleich has released yet. Lengthwise, you're looking at about 8 3/4 inches, or a little over 22 centimeters. And then for a height to the top of the crest, about 3 3/4 inches, or 9.5 centimeters. And then to the top of the tail, about 4.5 inches, or just shy of 11.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to our Schleich Dilophosaurus. And you can see it's got a pretty decent size to it. For being a Dilophosaurus, most Dilophosaurus figures are usually fairly small, so it is kind of nice to see one with a little bit bigger of a size. You can also see next to a Mattel Dilophosaurus that the Schleich version is just a little bit bigger. And then next to the previous version of the Dilophosaurus from Schleich, you can see kind of similar in size, but a little bit more length and everything for the newer version. It just kind of has a little more body mass to it. But I don't know, I mean, I feel like the older one, although kind of goofy looking, was a little bit of a better looking version of the Dilophosaurus. Like the feet looked less awkward, and the body just had kind of generic detail on that one as well, but for some reason I just feel like it looks a little bit better. I don't know, but at the same time kind of like a nerdy version of a Dilophosaurus. You do have to give them an A for persistence though, because here is the older version of the Schleich Dilophosaurus. So obviously as we kind of go back in time, the dinosaur has shrunken down and continues to decrease in size, but obviously this version is significantly smaller than this new Schleich version. We also have a comparison with the reborn Dilophosaurus, which you can see is a little bit smaller. And then one final comparison with potentially the best Dilophosaurus ever. We have the Beasts of the Mesozoic version next to Schleich, which obviously you can see this time the Beasts of the Mesozoic wins in size. So this brand new Schleich Dilophosaurus, the 2025 version, is definitely better than I was expecting, but still by no means is it a great figure. But it's Schleich. You know, you really don't come into Schleich expecting greatness when it comes to their dinosaur figures. You expect a Schleich-style dinosaur. And I will say, even though the Schleich figures can be pretty ugly at times, they still have a nice charm to them. You know, Schleich just has their own style, basically where they don't even seem to try when it comes to scientific accuracy, although I do have to give them props for giving the Dilophosaurus lips. But they don't really try to strive for the most accurate dinosaurs. They just kind of create their own versions of them. But this Dilophosaurus, again, definitely looks a little bit better in person. Still a little bit too wide when it comes to the head. Somewhat awkward looking as a whole. But the head sculpt from the side absolutely looks a million times better than I was expecting it to. The body, though, for me is the biggest problem because the body just has the most generic detail you could possibly imagine for a dinosaur. Well, I guess that's not true. It's not the most generic. I've seen way worse on Onyx figures and stuff like that, but it's not really that great. It's not what I expect from Schleich. Even though Schleich never has the greatest figures in the world, their fine detail is usually pretty good, and this one I think just looks kind of strange. Overall, the coloration is pretty decent, and the actual application of the paint is nicely done. There's not a whole lot to it other than some blue and brownish tones, and then kind of like a reddish brown or like a chocolate brown moving along the top of the dinosaur, and a nice brown wash. But I think it works pretty nicely for the figure and looks fairly decent, although they didn't paint the dew claws. But overall, it's not the ugliest Dilophosaurus out there, but it's definitely not the best. If you are interested, I will include a link in the description to where you can purchase it on the Schleich website. So make sure you check that link, go grab this if you want it, and like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.